The champagne flute slipped from Sarah Chen's trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the grand ballroom. As 200 pairs of eyes turned toward her, she stood frozen in a borrowed Valentino gown that cost more than she'd earned in her entire life, feeling every stare pierce through the careful makeup that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion etched into her face. Beside her, Marcus Blackwood, tech billionaire, Forbes cover star, and the man who'd found her sleeping on a park bench just 48 hours earlier dropped to one knee. The diamond ring in his hand caught the chandelier light, throwing prisms across the shocked faces of Manhattan's elite. Sarah's mind raced back to that cold Tuesday morning when her entire world had consisted of a cardboard box and a prayer that she'd survive another night. Now she couldn't breathe. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was never part of their arrangement. 48 hours earlier, Sarah had been invisible. That's what homelessness does. It renders you transparent. A ghost walking among people who look right through you. She'd been living on the streets for 7 months after a combination of medical bills from her mother's cancer, treatment, and a predatory landlord had stripped away everything she'd built. The advertising job she'd loved, the modest apartment in Brooklyn, the life she'd carefully constructed, all gone. Now she survived on whatever work she could find, sleeping in shelters when there was room, and on benches when there wasn't. That Tuesday, she was sitting on her usual bench in Madison Square Park, sketching in a battered notebook, the one luxury she'd refused to abandon, when a shadow fell across her page. She looked up to find a man in a suit that probably cost more than a used car, studying her drawing with genuine interest. "That's remarkable," Marcus said, gesturing to her sketch of the park fountain. "You've captured something most people never see." Sarah had heard every line, weathered every approach. She began gathering her things, preparing for the inevitable proposition or the equally inevitable cruelty. But Marcus sat down beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "I have an unusual request," he said, his voice weary in a way that surprised her. "And I'm prepared to pay you $50,000 if you'll hear me out." Sarah's hand stilled. $50,000? Enough to get an apartment, proper clothes for job interviews, a chance to rebuild, enough to be human again. "I'm listening," she said carefully. Marcus explained his predicament. His grandmother, the woman who'd raised him after his parents died, was dying. She had one final wish, to see him settled and happy before she passed. The problem was, Marcus had dedicated the last decade to building his company, surviving a ruthless business world that left no room for genuine connection. His previous relationship had imploded when he discovered his fiancée was selling stories about him to, "I need someone to attend a charity gala with me, then meet my grandmother," Marcus said. "Someone real. Everyone in my world wants something from me. Investors want my money. Socialites want my status. Reporters want my secrets. But you," he gestured to her worn clothes, her honest face, "you have no reason to pretend to be anything you're not. You want to hire a homeless woman to pretend to be your girlfriend?" Sarah's laugh was bitter. "Do you have any idea how that sounds?" "I know exactly how it sounds," Marcus replied quietly. "That's why I'm asking you, not telling you. And I'm not looking for a performance. My grandmother has spent her whole life seeing through people's lies. She'll know in 30 seconds if someone's faking. What I need is someone who'll spend time with an old woman and treat her with kindness. Someone who will be honest with me about whether I'm as much of a cold bastard as my board of directors says I am. Someone who has nothing to gain by lying to me." Sarah studied him carefully. She'd learned to read people on the streets. It was survival. Marcus looked exhausted, desperate, and surprisingly sincere. But it was the grief in his eyes that decided her. She recognized it. She'd worn that same expression watching her mother fade away, unable to afford the treatments that might have saved her. $75,000, she said. "And we do this right. If I'm meeting your grandmother, I'm not going to disrespect her with a half-hearted performance. If we're doing this, I'm going to actually get to know you. So when she asks me why I care about you, I'll have a real answer." Marcus extended his hand. Deal. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. Marcus set Sarah up in a hotel suite and hired a stylist, but insisted she choose clothes she felt comfortable in. "You're not a doll I'm dressing up," he said firmly. "Pick what makes you feel like yourself." Sarah chose elegant but simple pieces, refusing the most ostentatious options. They spent hours talking about his childhood, her life before homelessness, their dreams, their regrets. Marcus was brilliant and driven, but also funny and surprisingly humble about his achievements. He listened when she talked about her mother, about the advertising campaigns she'd created, about the shelter regular who'd taught her which streets were safest at night. "You're not what I expected," Marcus admitted the night before the gala. "What did you expect?" Sarah asked. "I don't know. Someone broken, maybe. Someone bitter." He shook his head. "But you're not broken. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met." "Homeless doesn't mean helpless," Sarah said quietly. "And surviving doesn't make you special. It just means you're not dead yet." The charity gala was overwhelming. Sarah had been to nice events before, but nothing like this. The ballroom dripped with wealth, crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, women in jewels that could fund a small nation. She felt the stares immediately, heard the whispers. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "Ignore them," he murmured. "Half these people inherited their money and think that makes them superior. The other half are so busy networking they wouldn't notice if the ceiling caved in." But then people began approaching, and Sarah realized Marcus had miscalculated. The stares weren't contemptuous, they were curious. Genuinely curious. Because Marcus Blackwood never brought dates to events, never smiled at galas, never looked at anyone the way he was looking at her. "Marcus, introduce us to your friend," said an older woman in emeralds, her eyes kind. As the evening progressed, something shifted. Sarah stopped feeling like an imposter and started remembering who she'd been before the streets, someone creative, capable, interesting. She talked about art and advertising, debated the ethics of tech innovation with a venture capitalist, and made Marcus's notoriously difficult business partner laugh 3 times. Marcus watched her with growing wonder, as if seeing something he'd been searching for without knowing it existed. Then came the moment that changed everything. A young waiter, probably 19, dropped a tray of champagne glasses. The crash silenced the room. The boy froze, terrified, as the event coordinator stormed over, already berating him. Sarah didn't think, she simply moved, kneeling in her expensive gown to help gather the broken glass. "It's okay," she said softly to the trembling waiter. "Everyone makes mistakes." "You're okay." Marcus knelt beside her, and then others followed. The woman in emeralds, a tech CEO, even the event coordinator's assistant. Within minutes, the mess was cleared, and the young waiter was blinking back grateful tears. When Sarah stood, Marcus was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. The rest of the gala passed in a blur. She was so focused on not tripping in her heels that she didn't notice. Marcus growing quieter, more thoughtful. They visited his grandmother the next morning. Eleanor Blackwood was tiny, sharp-eyed, and dying with the same fierce dignity she'd apparently lived with. Sarah sat beside her bed and simply talked about Marcus, about life, about regret and hope and the things that matter when everything else falls away. Eleanor held Sarah's hand with surprising strength. "You're good for him," Eleanor whispered. "You see him. Not the money, not the success, him." After they left, Marcus drove in silence for several minutes before pulling over. "I need to tell you something," he said, voice tight. "Meeting you these past few days, it's changed something. You're not pretending to care about people. You actually do. You helped that waiter because that's who you are. You sat with my grandmother like she was your own family because you meant it. And watching you at the gala, seeing you shine despite everything you've been through." He stopped, struggling for words. "I fell in love with you. Not the version I hired. The real you." Sarah's breath caught. "Marcus, that's not... We had an arrangement." "I know, and I'll honor it. You'll get your money, no strings attached. But I had to tell you the truth. Because you've taught me that. Honesty matters more than protecting yourself from pain." Sarah looked at this man who had every advantage she'd lost, every privilege she'd been denied, and saw not the billionaire but the lonely boy who'd lost his parents, the grandson holding vigil at his grandmother's bedside, the person brave enough to admit vulnerability. "Take me back to the shelter," she said quietly. Marcus's face fell, but he nodded, starting the car. When they arrived, Sarah asked him to wait. She went inside and found Rosa, the shelter director who'd shown her kindness when she had nothing. Rosa, Sarah said, I need you to help me do something important. 3 hours later, Marcus stood in the grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria for a hastily arranged announcement. His board of directors, key investors, and media contacts filled the room, summoned on short notice. Sarah stood beside him, heart pounding. Marcus took the microphone. I've asked you here today because I'm making a change. A significant one. He turned to Sarah. This is Sarah Chen. She's brilliant, creative, and has more integrity than anyone I've ever met. She's also been homeless for the past 7 months through no fault of her own, because our society fails people who need help most. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sarah felt her face flush, but Marcus kept going. I'm establishing the Eleanor Blackwood Foundation with an initial endowment of $500 million. Its mission is to provide not just housing, but comprehensive support, job training, mental health services, medical care, and pathways back to stability for people experiencing homelessness. And Sarah has agreed to direct it, because she knows firsthand what actually helps. He turned to face her fully. But before we start changing the world, I have one more question. Marcus dropped to one knee as Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. Sarah, these past 3 days have shown me what matters. Not money, not success, not what people think. You matter. Your kindness, your strength, your refusal to let circumstances destroy your humanity, that matters. I know this is fast, maybe crazy, but my grandmother taught me not to waste time when you find something real. He pulled out a ring, simpler than the extravagant diamonds around them, but beautiful. Will you marry me? Not because of an arrangement or an obligation, but because I love you, and I can't imagine facing another day without you in it. The room held its breath. Sarah thought of the bench, the cold nights, the invisibility. Then she thought of Marcus's eyes when she'd helped the waiter, of Eleanor's hand in hers, of Rosa crying happy tears when Sarah told her about the foundation. She thought of the advertising, career she'd lost, and the new purpose she'd found. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes. The room erupted in applause as Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment a billionaire chose love over pretense, when a homeless woman became a bride, when two people found each other across an impossible divide. That night, as they lay together in Marcus's penthouse, Sarah gazed at the city lights. Your grandmother, she said softly. Did you tell her before? I called her from the car, Marcus replied. Told her everything. She said she knew from the moment she met you. Said she could die happy now. His voice cracked. She passed 2 hours ago, peacefully. Sarah held him as he cried. This powerful man who'd given her back her life, now vulnerable in her arms. She thought about the strange journey that had brought them together. Desperation, meeting loneliness, honesty meeting wealth, love finding its way through the most unlikely circumstances. We're going to help so many people, she promised him. We're going to make sure nobody else feels invisible. Marcus nodded against her shoulder. Together, outside, New York City glittered with possibility. Inside, a billionaire and a former homeless woman planned a wedding, a foundation and a future built on the simplest, most revolutionary principle of all, that every human being deserves to be seen, valued, and loved, not for what they have, but for who they are.